The Alps. Night. The early 19th century. A blizzard erases the line between sky and earth. A man has been walking for hours. He lost the trail long ago. His legs sink into the snow up to his knees, then up to his waist. He falls. He tries to stand and realizes he has no strength left. The cold stops being pain. It becomes silence. The man closes his eyes, and at that very moment, through the blizzard, through the darkness, through a mile of snow, someone is already walking toward him. Someone who cannot speak. Someone who senses life where a human sees only snow. This is the story of the dogs who became a legend, and of one dog whose name the Alps have remembered for 200 years. To understand this story, you first need to understand the place where it happened. The Great St. Bernard Pass, nearly 2,500 meters above sea level. A narrow stone corridor between Switzerland and Italy, wedged among the peaks of the Western Alps. Today, it's a scenic route for tourists. But for 2,000 years, this was one of the very few roads connecting Northern Europe to the south. Roman legions marched here. Merchants, pilgrims, peasants, soldiers walked here. In 1800, Napoleon led an entire army across this pass. People simply had no choice. There was no shorter, safer way through the mountains. But this road had its price. 8 months a year, the pass lies buried in snow. The cover reaches several meters deep. Temperatures plunge far below -20. Fog can descend in minutes, and a man stops seeing his own feet. And then there are the avalanches, silent, sudden, unstoppable. And it was here at the highest and deadliest point of the road that people built a house, not a fortress, not an outpost, a house that turned no one away. About 1,000 years ago, a hospice appeared on the pass. It was founded by Bernard of Menthon, a priest, later canonized as a saint. His name would come to grace the pass, the hospice, and, centuries later, an entire breed of dogs. The Hospice of St. Bernard is not simply a monastery. It is a rescue station, built 800 years before the very concept of a rescue service existed. The rule of the hospice was simple, and it never changed through the centuries. Every traveler received shelter, food, and warmth, free of charge, no questions asked. Rich or poor, merchant or beggar, the door is open to all. But the monks didn't just wait for guests by the hearth. Every day, in any weather, they went out onto the trail. They met travelers on the ascent. They escorted people through the most dangerous stretches. They broke the path through fresh snow. And when someone didn't make it through, they walked into the blizzard to search. Picture that for a second. Not professional alpinists with modern gear, monks in wool robes with staffs and lanterns, walking into a whiteout to find a person they had never met. Year after year, century after century, they saved thousands of lives. But this work had a limit. Human eyes cannot see through a blizzard. A human nose cannot catch a scent under 3 meters of snow. Human legs sink where lightness and instinct are needed. The monks needed a helper who had all of that, and he arrived, on 4 paws. The exact date is unknown. Part of the hospice records has been lost, but sometime in the second half of the 17th century, they first appear in documents and paintings. Large mountain dogs at the monastery. Most likely, The first dogs were gifts from farmers in the valleys. These were powerful alpine-type dogs, descendants of ancient herding and guard breeds that had lived in these mountains for centuries. At first, their job was the simplest one imaginable: guard the hospice. The times were troubled, and a monastery standing alone on a pass made an easy target. But the mountains quickly revealed what these dogs were truly capable of. The monks began taking the dogs along on the trail, simply as company, and they noticed something strange. The dogs sensed the road beneath the snow where there were no landmarks at all. They steered around places where cracks and hollows hid under the smooth white surface. They felt the weather turning before any human could. And then came the great discovery. The dogs found people, living people, under the snow. What looked like a flat white field to a human was a map of scents to a dog. A St. Bernard's nose could detect a person beneath a layer of snow that would take hours to dig through, by various accounts, under 2, even 3 meters. Wide paws kept the dog on top of the crust where a man sank to his chest. A dense coat allowed it to work for hours in the freezing cold, and its sheer mass and strength to plow through snowdrifts and break a trail for the people following behind. The monks never set out to breed a rescue dog. They simply saw that the mountains themselves had already created the perfect rescuer. Only one thing remained: to start working together. And so was born, perhaps, the first partnership in history where the dog was neither a servant nor a guard. It was a teammate. Now imagine how it looked. Night, a snowstorm. A traveler who was expected before dusk never arrived. A word comes up from the village. 3 set out on the ascent this morning and vanished. The bell, a quick muster, lanterns, ropes, shovels, something hot to drink. And the dogs, already at the door. They say the dogs sensed the preparations before the monks had finished dressing. The team walks out into the blizzard. In front, not a man. In front, the dogs. They were usually sent in pairs or a small team. The dogs moved in a sweeping search pattern, zigzagging, reading the air with their noses. A human scent lingers in the mountains. The cold presses it down onto the snow. The wind carries it along the hollows. The monks walked in the dogs' tracks, literally. A trail broken through virgin snow by a powerful dog saved the men's strength and time. And time, up here, meant life. And then, the dog freezes. It circles one spot, sniffs, and begins to dig, furiously, with wide paws hurling snow behind it. A bark. One dog stays and digs. The second, according to the monks' accounts, could turn and run back to the hospice or to the team to lead the people to the spot. Beneath the snow, a person, often unconscious. By this point, hypothermia is already doing its work. The pulse is faint, the breathing barely there, and here the dogs did something no one ever taught them. They lay down beside the person they had found, pressing close. The enormous warm body of a St. Bernard worked like a living furnace. The dogs licked the person's face, and that rough, insistent warmth often brought them back to consciousness before the monks even arrived. Then, human hands. Rub the limbs, wrap them up, give them something warm, lift them, carry them, to the hospice, to the fire, back to life. That's how it worked. No radio, no helicopters, no thermal sensors, a nose, paws, warmth, and an absolute tireless readiness to walk into the blizzard, as many times as it took. Over the centuries of the hospice's existence, the monks and their dogs, by the Abbey's own estimate, saved some 2,000 people. 2,000 people who were supposed to stay in the snow and didn't. Sooner or later, every great story gets a name. One name that holds all of it. For the story of the Alpine rescuers, that name is Barry. Barry was born at the hospice in 1800. Didn't look like the St. Bernards in modern photographs. Those grew larger and heavier later. Barry was leaner, drier, quicker. A dog built not for the show ring, but for work. And work he did. 12 years. 12 winters on the pass. The monastery records and accounts of that era credit Barry with saving more than 40 people. Sit with that number for a moment. More than 40 times this dog found someone in the snow whom no one else could have found. The most famous story about Barry is the one about a freezing child. They say the dog found a boy in the snow, warmed him with his body, brought him back to his senses, and the child managed to hold on to his back as Barry carried him to safety. Whether it happened exactly that way, we can no longer verify. The story passed from mouth to mouth, gathering details, changing shape. That is how memory works. But here is what matters. This legend did not grow out of thin air. It grew out of 40 real rescues, out of 12 years of real work. Barry needed no invention, only a little embellishment of the truth. Accounts of the end of Barry's life differ too. There is a dark legend about a tragic mistake in a blizzard, but the documents say otherwise, and this truth is better than any legend. The monks did not leave the aging Barry to live out his days on the pass. In 1812, he was taken down to Bern, into a well-earned retirement. He spent his last 2 years there in warmth and care, and passed away quietly in 1814, of old age, as befits a hero who had done everything he was meant to do. The people of Bern knew exactly who their city had taken in. After Barry's death, he was not consigned to the earth and to oblivion. He was preserved, and today, 2 centuries later, you can still see Barry at the Natural History Museum in Bern. He stands there with his head raised, as if still reading the wind from the pass. And at the hospice of St. Bernard, a tradition has lived on ever since. In every generation, one dog is named Barry. The name never leaves the pass. It is handed down like a post, like a duty, like a promise. On Barry's monument at the dog cemetery near Paris, the epitaph carved in stone says it plainly: he saved the lives of 40 people, 40 people, 40 families, 40 stories that got to continue, and one dog. And now, the most famous object in the history of these dogs. Close your eyes and picture a St. Bernard. What do you see? A huge, kind dog in the snow, and around his neck, a small wooden barrel of brandy for freezing travelers. Everyone knows this image. It's on postcards, in cartoons, on labels, in advertising. There's just one problem. There is no evidence that the hospice's rescue dogs ever actually worked with barrels. Not in the monastery records, not in the testimonies of the rescued. The monks of the hospice have said it plainly more than once. The barrel is not a working tool. It's a souvenir. So where did it come from? From art. In 1820, a young English painter named Edwin Landseer painted a picture: Alpine dogs reviving a freezing traveler. To one of the dogs, he added a small barrel around the neck, simply as an expressive detail, an artistic flourish. The painting became famous. The image spread across engravings, postcards, and books, and within a couple of decades the whole world was certain a real Saint Bernard must carry a barrel. The irony is that, medically speaking, the idea is actually harmful. Alcohol creates a deceptive feeling of warmth, but in hypothermia, it only speeds up the body's heat loss. Brandy is the last thing a freezing person needs, but the legend proved stronger than the fact. It was too beautiful to die. And you know what? In the end, the monks accepted the rules of the game. Today, the hospice dogs are sometimes photographed with barrels. For the guests, for the memories. Everyone understands. It's no longer a deception. It's a tribute to the myth that made the St. Bernards famous around the world. Sometimes a legend is just love, retold a little too beautifully. Time has changed everything. The mountains are now patrolled by helicopters, thermal cameras, avalanche transceivers. Professional rescuers work with other breeds, shepherds, Labradors, border collies. They're lighter, faster, easier to fly by helicopter to an avalanche site. But here's the remarkable thing. Ask anyone, anywhere in the world, what kind of dog rescues people in the snow? The answer will be the same. A Saint Bernard. Not because it's the fastest, not because it still walks into blizzards, but because this breed was the first to prove a simple thing. A dog can be neither property, nor protection, nor amusement, but the one who follows you into the storm. St. Bernards no longer stand watch on the pass. In the early 2000s, care of the monastery dogs passed to a dedicated foundation, the Barry Foundation. Yes, named after that very dog. The dogs live on, travel up to their home pass in summer, greet visitors, and work in therapy programs. Their warmth now heals not frostbite, but loneliness and illness. The Saint Bernard became a symbol that help is coming, that even in the deepest white silence, someone is looking for you. All of modern avalanche dog work, every search and rescue canine unit in the world, they are the heirs of those monastery dogs. The methods have changed, the breeds have changed. The essence remains what it was 300 years ago on the pass. A nose that senses life, and a heart that does not turn back. Let's return to where we began. Night, a blizzard, a man in the snow. He can no longer shout. His voice won't carry through the wind. He can no longer walk. His legs won't obey. He can't even raise a hand. All he has left is a faint trace of warmth, the last proof that he is still here. And it was enough, because somewhere in the white darkness, he was being searched for by someone who understood no words, who didn't know his name, who could never have explained why he walks into the storm. He simply sensed life beneath the snow and walked toward it. 200 years have passed, but if you ever see a Saint Bernard, big, unhurried, with kind, sorrowful eyes, remember, this is not just a dog. This is the memory of those who walked into the blizzard and came back not alone.